Hello and welcome to the Kinda Sorta Maybe Like a podcast. I'm Aaron Demeter, and you're about to hear an interview with comedian Dan Telfer from the Oddblock Comedy Festival in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Hi everybody, this is Greg Proops, the only American you can trust, and you're digging ShowbizMonkeys.com because you're so now.
Around this town, I'm alright. Around this town, I'm alright. I mean, no consequence when you playing with the fire.
Most people will know you from your stand-up. They'll know you as a panelist on At Midnight, and you're also the social media producer on At Midnight.
Yeah.
So that's super cool. That to me, that feels like a big job. It's a huge social media-based show. How was that when you first took it on?
It was exciting. I turned in a writing packet for the show, and they sort of created... Some people tell me they created the position for me. Other people tell me it was already there. But back in 2013... there wasn't a lot of social media stuff in like nightly comedy shows, except for like Team Coco was around. And so, you know, they really wanted to have a strong social media presence. They'd reserved that Twitter account of At Midnight, and it had like 200 followers. So that's been fun to sort of be a part of making that go from 200 followers to over 500,000 followers. That's been really cool.
Yeah, it definitely, it's one of the strongest social media presences in comedy that I see all over the place. I see it on Reddit, I see it on my Facebook, I see it all over my Twitter, I see other comedians tweeting at it. Was this your first, did you have previous experience doing social media managing, or?
Yeah, a little bit. I had run a couple of accounts for The Onion when I was an editor over there. And it was fun. I really liked it. The opportunity of doing it for a TV show was really exciting. I had done it for like web series before, and I'd written web series and was, pretty popular on Twitter before. But it was fun to really, put it in the voice of a TV show. It was fun to be like, okay, I have to speak from the point of view of an unreal entity. It sort of has to sound like Chris Hardwick. It has to sound like a TV show that is not Hardwick claiming to be Hardwick. We never claim that the show's account is like Chris personally responding to people, and we try to use the royal we instead of I and stuff like that. But we still have like a personal tone and try to respond to as many people as we can. But we'll get like, 200,000-300,000 at replies a night, and that's why there's a whole team of us. It's me, a guy Mike Ginn, and a woman Allison Gertz, who runs social media. I'm the only one who's been doing the social media since the beginning of the show, but Allison started in research and got promoted up to it. We took Mike Ginn on earlier this year as a third person.
A big part of your act, I notice, is you talk about your family a lot, talk about your kids. What is it like being a comedian, having to tour while also being a father, raising kids? Did you find it difficult at first to kind of balance the two, or did you just kind of take a break for a bit? How did you manage to balance that?
I played it by ear, and, I always considered my marriage to be a partnership where you make all the compromises necessary, and just, I tried to never take a gig that felt really shitty. I always try to run road stuff by my wife and see if her facial expression changes, and be like, oh, you know what? I'll take a pass on that. But it's been great in a lot of ways. My kids, obviously hate it. And if I think about my kids, for more than half a second, I absolutely hate leaving the house every single time. But I love doing comedy, and, going on the road is an opportunity to provide for them. And I make it work as best I can. I originally started focusing more on stand-up than improv and other kinds of writing back in like 2006, 2007, before I had kids. And, it's definitely been a roller coaster time management wise, but it's still been okay. Like it's really hard. People I know often quit stand-up because of wanting to raise a family, and I try to just do a lot of local shows and not be on the road all the time. Working for a TV show really helps. Living in LA really helps. I get to do a lot of really cool stand-up stuff without having to travel because I'm in LA. And in Chicago, it was like I would be on the road all the time, driving to different cities. And I'm sure it's similar in a lot of parts of Canada because all the big cities are so spread out horizontally. So
You, like you said, you were originally based in Chicago, and then you, like many comedians, made the move to LA. Was that a huge adjustment?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I hate the weather out there. I'm not an outside, like, sun kind of person, and a lot of people just can't shut the fuck up about how great all the sun is, and that's like, oh, this is geographically just a nightmare. It can be really frustrating, too, just because of how spread out LA is. LA is this metropolis that's like, you know, people still call Santa Monica LA, but it's 2 hours from Hollywood, like, in traffic. It's horrible. So in Chicago, if something's 2 hours away, you would never do it. But in LA, it's like, oh, you got an audition in Santa Monica. I know you live in Pasadena, so it's going to take you 3 hours to get there, but it's just an audition. You got to do it. It's required. And it can be overwhelming at times. But what's great about it versus pretty much every other city I've ever been in, including New York, which I love New York, but you can actually live in LA and tell people you're like a performer, and they don't give you like this condescending stink eye, like, oh, what a stupid hobby you have. You know, even a writer, like, if you were that in Chicago, they're like, oh, but what do you do that's not like insulting to like your parents? Like, they're like, oh, a writer, ew, that's so precious. Oh, that's so nice. That's a big thing in Chicago, where they pay all their artists nothing. They just want you to do everything for free. And, you know, have a day job and just do it at night for no pay. And they're, you know, right now Chicago has actually gotten really bad because they're creating all these laws that make it hard to produce free shows. They're seeing you have to pay all these fees and performers licenses and stuff. And like, yeah, they're running a lot of the free performance out of Chicago. But at least in LA, it's like, yeah, there's a certain amount of like, oh yeah, I'm yet another performer in this town. But also they respect it even like a little bit. That's a huge gift because, you know, you'll tour as a stand-up in all these different states, all these different parts of Canada, and they'll be like, oh, it's just, I can't believe how famous you are that this club flew you out here. And I'll be like, oh, I'm not that famous. It's just I got lucky. Because they don't perceive doing it as like a real profession. You're like this weird dream creature if you do this. But it's not in LA. It's like, okay, it's normal. Yeah, you have more opportunities in LA, many more shows to get. It's not like where we see, in Chicago, we have these entertainment taxes coming into small venues where they've suddenly said that, oh, well, you know, rap, country, rock, comedy isn't fine art anymore, so you have to pay thousands of dollars in back taxes. Whereas in LA, you seem to have opportunities all over the place. Yeah, as much as they want to tax you for all the free pro bono stuff you do, and you're like, I'm not making any money, and they're like, oh, well, we'll find money to tax you for, and it can get infuriating. But yeah, what's really nice, in the last 10 years, LA has developed a sort of indie scene that is big enough that it's like Chicago too. It has like a lot of local support. I mean, it can be just as much of a bummer because a lot of the indie performers are bitter assholes like they are everywhere else. But you can still find your community in LA. And I think for a while, those communities in LA were a lot smaller and more exclusive and niche and didn't want to welcome new people into it. They were just sort of like, we're the 10 alternative comics in LA and the rest of you aren't cool enough to hang out with us. Now there's like 30 alternative venues in LA, and that's more like Chicago. And I think LA is, because of how big it is, it's been able to take a lot of what's great about New York and Chicago and kind of let that come in too. What's good. So. Yeah, it seems like it's because of its size, it can breed subcultures. It can breed these almost, I don't know, not subcultures, but almost it's communities within it that feel like smaller quote unquote cities. Yeah, like over the last 100 years, LA figured out that you don't want to actually have that many studios for TV and film in Hollywood. It's not a great neighborhood to do it in. Like, it's better and cheaper sometimes to do it in Burbank or Culver City, and it took longer, but the indie communities sort of figured it out too. It's better to have, like your local gallery thing in like Beverly Hills or Silver Lake or something, and then the comedy shows figure that out, and then nobody does anything in Hollywood. Like, tourists come to the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and you want to tell them like, there's nothing to do here. Like, Hollywood's got like the Ripley's Believe It or Not place, a Hard Rock Cafe, the Chinese theater, and that's it. Like, there's like so little to actually do in Hollywood proper, which used to be the main hub of Los Angeles, that it's kind of amazing if once you start finding all the stuff going on, there's a lot to do out there. I've grown to appreciate it more. It's hard, and there's definitely smaller communities like the live. I came from theater, and like I miss. I know my wife does too. Just like the feeling that you could go do a play or write a play and like have it taken seriously. Whereas like in LA, all that stuff is done by, I don't know, weirdos. Sometimes it's at least in my experience, like it's a lot of people who are, again, not welcoming. They're like obsessed with their own niche and don't want to invite a new class of people in. Whereas in Chicago, it was a lot of working class, like, let's all just make shows together, whatever it takes. So
Yeah, it seems like, well, I mean, we're not making money from this, so
yeah,
we got to bond together.
Whereas in LA, it's like, oh, do you have fake boobs? And you can't be in our show that pays nothing. Like,
Yeah.
And it's like, what the fuck? So, you know, I'm still learning the ropes out in LA, but so far I've been really happy with how much it's changed in just the last 10 years. It's been nice because I took pilgrimages out there for like 7 years to see if it was the right place to move before, and would just do a bunch of stand-up shows, and eventually it was like, oh, this is gonna work. This is gonna work.
Another thing this year, just recently, you had announced you've beat cancer. Sort of.
I mean, I kicked its ass for the second time.
Yeah, that's
it's like it's like one of those things where like you always want to celebrate, but also it's your cells malfunctioning. You can't be like, oh man, I tricked those cells. They'll never do anything wrong again. I dare them. You know, you don't want to do that. But.
Yeah, but when you first found out, I noticed there was a large campaign to raise money to help your wife and kids out during your chemo.
Yeah, that went really well.
Yeah, and I mean, it just must have felt amazing to have this much support from. I saw the AV Club posting it. Just the internet kind of bonded together to help you out, and
I'm looking forward to having more energy and losing some weight. I gained a ton of weight from all the steroids, so like. I'm literally wearing a t-shirt for the festival right now to cover up the fact that this shirt, when I button it up, no longer can hold back my torso. Like I've just ballooned, and that sucks. But I am really lucky in that it's a kind of cancer where chemo generally just annihilates it. I've had to go through it. It's actually the second time. The first time I didn't tell anybody because I didn't need chemo. But this time I was like, fuck, I have to go bald and it's going to be really obvious. I'm going to gain all this weight. So, yeah, I told people, and I cannot express how grateful I am. It sucks that I have to now go back to being a normal person who nobody gives pity money to. That was real fun. But, you know, I'm really excited I get to experience my midlife crisis properly in my 30s as opposed to my 40s. And I'm going to... you know, take advantage of all the goodwill that's been thrown to me, and it's really exciting.
Yeah. Did you find that you could incorporate it into your act, or did you keep it out of your comedy?
A little bit. Like, I have a few jokes, but a lot of it has been so dark, it's just been like, people be like, oh. So I'm working on it. I find it interesting because I've always done dark humor, but like the cancer stuff is so frightening to people that it sends them into pity so deeply that they don't want to laugh at anything. Mm-hmm. They just kind of feel bad for themselves. That's honestly the hardest part about cancer, is how much you have to take care of other people and babysit their feelings. That it can be really hard to incorporate into your comedy because the whole audience is going, oh, which is the opposite of laughter. So yeah, you know, I'm definitely playing around with it, but I'm easing my way into it.
Yeah. Nerd culture has always been a big part of your act. Did you find that you eased yourself into that? Did you always kind of gravitate towards nerd culture, or was that something that...
I mean, I was just born, like really spastic and introverted, and I've become able to harness my extroverted side more as an adult, but I'm still very like introverted in most situations and just sort of need to recharge my energy, and as opposed to sitting at a table with a lot of other people and being loud. Like, I just avoid that. But I at first I think I incorporated it more than I do now, because I think there was a niche for it like 10 years ago, but now it's almost so overdone. And also, like, nerd culture is kind of eating its own tail at this point. One thing that's really bothered me is how it's embraced the let's be an asshole, and like I always thought the whole point of nerds taking over was to be inclusive and be like, hey, like, if the underdogs get to take over, like, we need to let all the underdogs have a seat at the table. And there's a lot of people who, now that they've become more powerful than their childhood bullies, can't wait to torture everyone. There's a lot of Ramsey Boltons out in nerd culture taking over. So, you know, I'm lucky I get to work with a guy, Chris Hardwick, who is all about inclusiveness, but there's so many people who've kind of like ruined nerd culture for me personally that I try to be careful about taking any label on. I think it's more important that, especially as a comedian, we speak truth to power. And if the power is now a bunch of hackers who post people's social security numbers online and stuff like that to ruin their lives, and I think it's more responsible of us to reject that and fight against that nihilism than it is to just be like, oh, we're part of a cool club that likes comic books. Like, we have to actually examine it, I think, as we get older and society advances.
Awesome. One of my favorite bits by you is your bimbo bread bit.
Yeah, thank you.
Are you waiting for the call to be the spokesperson for Bimbo Bread to voice the bear, or?
It hasn't happened. I haven't done that bit in a long time because I put it on an album, like 5 years ago. But I'm still fascinated by that because it's a nonsense word when they made it up in Spanish, and then it means this very insulting thing in English. I can't believe it's still happening because I still go to the store. And it's really common in LA where there's, the population is huge Hispanic population. There's just bimbo bread everywhere. It's supposed to be pronounced bimbo. Mm-hmm. It's part of my bit, right? Like, it's like they beg you to pronounce it bimbo to make it the Spanish nonsense word. It's not. And people still pick it up. Like, you'll hear all the time people at the grocery store in Los Angeles pick it up and be like, look at this bread. Hey honey, we should buy this funny bread. It's got a bear. It says bimbo. Like you really wonder if the people in the boardroom have any idea. This bread sells so much. It's so popular. To this day, the bit is done, but I'm fascinated every time.
That about does it with our time. Where can people find you coming up? Do you have shows coming up?
That's a great question. I headline Flappers a lot in Burbank. I'm on Twitter a lot. Obviously, because that's my job. but yeah, I'm on Twitter. I've also started taking my Twitch channel seriously. I play a lot of No Man's Sky on Twitch, and I'm going to play other stuff like Overwatch and Rocket League on there. I've just committed to Twitch. I've been looking at it for a long time, and now I'm having a lot of fun with it. So I'm Telfer Dan on Twitch. And yeah, I'll be announcing plenty more comedy dates soon, but got one more surgery left over from this cancer thing, and then I'm hoping it'll be the last hurdle and I can start doing more stuff.
All right. Well, we all wish you good luck with the surgery. I'm sure everything will go well. I've been Aaron Demeter with comedian Dan Telfer. You can find more of me at entertainment-value.com. Thank you for joining us.
ShowbizMonkeys.com